Newsfirst, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat.
And very good evening to you and a warm welcome to Newsline Live, a day before our 75th Independence Day celebrations. Goodness knows what we are going to be celebrating or saluting. Anyhow, today, very special evening. It's probably magical because it's a debut Newsline program for my guest, and I can't really believe that, but it is what it is. 8 years on, we have for the first time on Newsline Live, Vraie Balthazaar, who is of course the team lead at the NPP and the mayoral candidate for the CMC Colombo. Very good evening, Vraie. Welcome to this program.
Good evening.
And it really is your debut program, isn't it?
It's my debut program in English.
In English,
I've
yes.
been doing a lot of political discussions on Sirasa, for instance, in Sinhala, but this is oddly and strangely my first in English.
Well, you know, they always say that when it's crunch time, you come on Newsline.
Well.
And so here we go. So tell me, very simply, why did you give up a whole career in the media and all that? And why did you want to enter politics?
Well, that's a really great question. I'm glad we started with that. Well, I didn't really give up a career in media per se. I worked for 10 years. I think I did a good run. I worked as a freelance MC, a very different life. But somewhere down the line, and this is really my catalyst, is very personal. I had 2 kids, and I realized at some point in time, unless I was taking the politics of this country seriously enough, that was the space that they would occupy. And I realized that very soon, like most middle-class families in Colombo and around the island, my aspiration would be to send my kids overseas. And I think I wanted to find a way to commit to making sure that they, along with truly, I mean, I know this sounds like quite a cliche, but I believe that all children should have the opportunity to live here and to expand whatever, businesses they want to, to have those aspirations here in their home country. And so for me, this was a catalyst. And it started off with the 52-day constitutional crisis. I realized I needed to be on my feet a little bit more. And very slowly, I kind of merged in with different political parties as an activist, not parties per se, but as a non-partisan activist. And over time, I found a party that resonated with me, and this is the Jatika Jana Balavegiya for me.
Excellent. Thank you for your questions. They've already started coming. 0772 300 305, SMS or WhatsApp, please. Kindly do not phone it through because we can't answer it, right? And your messages come straight through here. So it's as direct as you can get. Right, tell me, tomorrow, we thought we'd just mention it tomorrow, the 75th Independence Day. Are we celebrating independence or dependence? What do you think?
I think the people of this country have already made it quite clear about there is a lack of things to celebrate at this point in time. People are, our situation is pretty dire. There's nothing new to add on to that. But this need that the government has to display the fact that, they think that we need these celebrations, I think it is unnecessary, certainly. I think if we had something symbolic to remember or to commemorate this day, it would have been different. But this is certainly not symbolic. This is a very expensive way in a time where people really can't manage anything. They are not eating.
Expensive way to satiate one's ego?
Certainly. And I think that's what it is. This is a first-time president trying to make sure that, he gets his day at that stand tomorrow.
Do you think it's first time and last time, President?
I think the people of this country will speak, and I have a feeling that that's exactly how they will see it.
Right, let's get a bit serious now, right? You're representing the NPP. So I thought I'll ask you some questions about that, and not forgetting that Vraie Balthazaar is the mayoral candidate for the NPP in Colombo. I will ask her questions about local government too. But Sri Lanka is in the midst of a severe economic crisis, never before in our near 75-year history. And therefore, my question to you is, what is your position, what's your party's position on the full implementation of the 13th Amendment?
I think this is a question that's been very present in the conversations that people have been having about politics yesterday and today. But I will say this, for us, it's it's interesting that this should crop up now, just prior to an election. We have to have an understanding as to why it is cropping up now. Why we have to be able to analyze that conversation also. Why now, right? And we understand that this is a very sensitive topic to most. We understand that there are different takes to it. On our part, we believe that it would be interesting to hear. We would like to hear what the President, what Dinesh Gunawardena as a Prime Minister, and also what Mahinda Rajapaksa, who we know is behind the orchestration of so much of this. We'd like to know what their stance is. On our part, we believe that there needs to be a fresh constitution which happens with speaking to people, and I think that is something that we've always been saying. We talk about building the powers that people want, and that is a conversation for us. For us as NPP, and I know that it makes it a little more complex in giving you an answer that's specific, but that is what it is for us.
So it's sensitive. That means you would rather not implement it, but you'd rather discuss it again. Is that have I got it right? If I was to
I think that we need to be able to have longer discussions with the people that it affects before we are able to say something.
What do you have to say when the Mahanayakas are urging the President to not implement the 13th Amendment?
Exactly what I said before. I think
so you are more on the page of the Mahanayakas than you are with
We will always be on the page of the people, but we need to be able to discuss this with the people. And
but, I mean, honestly, how do we know what the Mahanayakas, whether the Mahanayakas are representative of what the people say?
I think historically we would be able to, it's not necessarily always the same reflection. So it's best to always hear from the people. And of course the Mahanayakas are a portion of that.
But the people have spoken, because the 13th Amendment is part of it's been constitutionally done.
The 13th Amendment has also been...
law, as Mr. Wickremesinghe said.
Exactly. It is a part of the law, and it's also something that's been around for 35 years. So it's interesting.
So the 13th Amendment also is rather like most things in this country, all talk and no action.
Perhaps.
It's a bit like that to me. It sounds like that to me. But tell me about this. What's the NPP? I'm asking these questions because, ladies and gentlemen, the NPP appear to be on the cusp of some great discovery by the people of Sri Lanka, and therefore national matters must take precedence over local matters. And local matters is an indication, of course, of what will happen nationally, which is probably why we're having the election. But tell me, what is your party's stance on the size of the military?
I think we've always maintained the fact that we have an extremely large military. Given the fact that we are not a country at war, we certainly need to relook at the numbers, because we also understand in terms of public expenditure, a lot of that does go towards salaries of the military. So what
would your party sort of think of doing with people who are, say, if you sort of trim the size of the military from 250,000 to, I don't know, 80,000? What would you do with the balance?
I think that's something that we would need to, with pretty much everything that we've discussed about the public sector for us, one of the things that we do say is that it's not just about clearing out people, it's also about relooking and reallocating these resources. And so very much, I think, even in this case, when we're talking about the military, there will be certain, perhaps, reallocations that will benefit the good of the people.
Do you think, on this, going back to this business, that the JVP, the NPP are on the cusp of some great discovery by the voters of this country? Do you think that you expect that the people will vote NPP on the basis they are the least corrupt?
I think people have multiple reasons as to why they want to vote for us, and certainly that is one reason. But there's been a real shift in people's understanding of how they view politics and how they view their own engagement with politics. And there has been a real longing for something that they consider to be new and fresh. And they're very tired of the system that existed. Like, if I'm going to bring it back to something a little local, which is, just our local government here. If you look at the Colombo Municipal Council, it's forever. I mean, it's a very old council, about 150 years old, of which, since in the independence, post-independence, has always been to one party. It's always been, one party's business to run the council. But people are tired of that. People do want change, because there is a dire need in their homes, at their workplaces, that they don't have that faith and trust in those parties that they've always traditionally voted for.
Indeed. The majority in the Colombo Municipal Council area, I'm told, are Muslim. How does your party appeal to that minority majority in this town, this city?
So I think there are a few answers to that question. You're going to have to bear with me a little bit. I think for the longest time, again, people have voted in. I think we've had over 5 or 6 mayors who've been Muslim, but it's not always fair to say that,
No, I do beg your pardon. I'm not suggesting that you may not be elected because you are a non-Muslim. That's not what I meant. What I'm saying is, why would the majority community in this town, in this city, why would they vote for an NPP mayor? And
I can answer that. I think they are looking for a leader with no corruption. They're looking for a party that represents the things that people in particular in the last year have been calling for, which is for a change in system. And I don't think they are going to see that with the other parties that will put forward names of those, especially on the basis of religion and race, into that pitch. And I don't think people, I think this time, and we believe this time, that change is going to happen.
And is it, how is the NPP looking at all their candidates across all electoral platforms, local government, provincial, parliamentary, and then the presidential as well? Does the NPP say to all its candidates, like you must make public your asset declaration?
We have traditionally always shared our assets, which is a part of the process of running for office. That is already a part of our processes with the Elections Commission, and we share it with the Elections Commission, which is what we're mandated to do.
But what about going the extra mile and going beyond the electoral mandate or the Elections Commission's rules? And how about putting it all out in public?
I think that's certainly a conversation that, I mean, people want to see transparency and accountability.
How about you, yourself?
I think I will obviously do what we will do.
You follow what the party says?
I think in certain instances we have shared values and we had shared interests, and I wouldn't use the word followed, but I certainly do think that we will work together at making sure.
Would you be taking a leaf out of Eran Wickramaratne's book, for example, even though he's from another party, and would you make your asset declaration public?
First, I'm going to ask you this. There are people, I'm not saying Iran, but there have certainly been other people on that list who have declared their assets, who we also know may not be, I mean, just because you declare assets, it doesn't mean that you are clean. Right? And I think that's clear from that list as well. So I would like to see a more accountable system in which if we are collectively declaring assets, then there has to be some kind of checks and balances of how that process also happens. And I think it's not fair to say, oh, you're not declaring assets, or just because you declared assets, then you become a better, cleaner person. And I think that's evident with those some people who've already declared their assets, and we know that declaration doesn't really count for much.
Many messages from our viewers who say that they're delighted to have you as the guest today. So, you must have done something wrong, or something right, I mean. But tell me, why would the people of Colombo vote for you?
Because we are representative of everything that they have asked for. If you look at our team, we have in Colombo, the Colombo Municipal Council alone has 5 electoral seats, 47 wards, 113 candidates. I am the team lead, which makes me, I think we use the term team lead, but for the purpose of, I think, those watching, that means I am the mayoral candidate. But I am one representative of a very, very strong and diverse team. We have, in that question you asked me before about the Muslim vote, I mean, we have those who represent Muslims in our group. We have over 20 amazing men and women who represent their constituencies, who belong to those categories. But I don't want to say that Faraz as saying, oh, we've done the token representation, or we've done the Muslim list, and we've done the Tamil list, and we've done the Sinhala list. We also have burgers, but I'm not the only burger on the list. We have other burgers also. But I'm just saying this, I'm putting it out there to say that we really do encapsulate that diversity. We have a very, very strong team that includes also those who've been in council before. We have 6 council members of the 119 already serving in council, and many of them are looking at running again. So, yeah.
Thank you. It's now time for the headlines. That's the one. A peek at the headlines from the Newsfirst Primetime News team. We'll see you on the other side of the break with Vraie Balthazaar from the NPP.
Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.
Newsfirst Headlines. Main sponsor.
Durden's Hospital, dedicated to you.
The remains of His Grace, Most Reverend Dr. Oswald Gomez in Colombo for public respect. Funeral on Monday. All set for the 75th Independence Day celebration at Gaulface. Court order prevents unauthorized entry to Gaulface and surrounding areas. CEB takes back assurance given to Supreme Court on suspending power cuts. 2 members of the Public Utilities Commission resign. Sri Lanka bondholder group called for domestic debt reorganizing. Ashu Mara Singh reappointed to advisory port. Karu Jayasuriya bestowed with Sri Lanka's highest civil honor.
Newsfirst Headlines. Main sponsor.
Durden's Hospital, dedicated to you. Experience the best in healthcare at Durden's Hospital's new Alfred Place wing. We continue to evolve into a purpose-built hospital of the future, with an ambience built to deliver world-class care. Durden's Hospital, dedicated to you. Experience the best in healthcare at Durden's Hospital's new Alfred Place wing. We continue to evolve into a purpose-built hospital of the future, with an ambience built to deliver world-class care. Durden's Hospital, dedicated to you.
Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.
And welcome back. I'm in conversation this evening with Vraie Cally Balthazaar, the NPP mayoral candidate for Colombo. Vraie, tell me, what is the biggest thing that you're going to do for Colombo?
I think we have a lot of things lined up. We understand that Colombo is a very complex space. It's very, like I said earlier, it's very diverse, but it's also very complex. And some of the issues that people have been dealing with, housing, infrastructure, transport, health, also facilities for women and children, these are all equally important. So it's not one thing, but I think we need to be able to put all of these things on the table and be able to make far more sustainable choices. And also, I'm going to use this word, I think a far more humanistic approach to dealing with the problems of people in Colombo, because quite often there are certain issues that are dealt with and have been dealt with over the last 20-30 years that are considered to be progress because it is seen as development, but we're not always taking the side of the people. We are looking at infrastructure, we're looking at buildings, we're looking at shifting people from one place to another, but often we're not really looking at how it affects the humans that live in this wonderful city.
Thank you. There's a question here from a viewer who's saying, and then asking, the saying here that the Rosie Serenayake decided to plant some agricultural items in front of the office, if you like. And so the question to you is, if you were to become the mayor, would you be digging up Viharamadevi Park and cultivating that?
I don't think we need to do that. I think whatever is existing in terms of, I've seen the garden
is that
space.
Enough for a salad?
There's enough for quite a few salads, but it certainly isn't. I think that's kind of a, when we're looking at Colombo, that has definitely a food crisis, right? A lot of people in Colombo, considering that 60% of Colombo is poor, and many of them also work in the informal sector, which means it's daily work, right? So what I'm trying to get at is that it's going to be very difficult for people. The food crisis is real, not too far away from the grandeur of the municipal council, less than a kilometer, in around that space, you have people who live in a very dire way. So I think for us, it would not just be about making sure that there were little garden patches, which are great and wonderful, but not really addressing the real problem of people, which is something that's, I think, a lot more problematic. And so for us, it wouldn't be just about growing things, but also about things like, for instance, community kitchens, which we saw a lot of last year, and making sure that people are able to feed their families, no matter how much money they had or they didn't have, Do
you find it odd that, while you say, 60% and all that business, right? Do you find it odd that the eating houses in Colombo are sort of chock-a-block?
I don't think...
They're quite full,
Not the ones that I frequent, but some are, but a lot of them are, they're not staffed in the way that, people need to eat. And this is something that I think if we're looking at also income generators for Colombo, there are so many things that people in Colombo can do. And I know there are certain areas that have already been built to make sure that people have access to food, people are cooking, sharing their meals. But I think it can be done on a far more a wider basis, where we're providing jobs, opportunities and food to people.
On the campaign trail, are you sometimes asked about the past of the JVP, and are you sometimes asked why doesn't the party publicly apologize for their past transgressions?
I think I want to answer that question in two parts. Yes, quite often we get asked, not just at local government level, but obviously when we meet people who are very curious as to what happened and why it happened. And I think it requires us to also understand a history for us on our part, understand a history that's far more complex than the narrative that we've been taught through media for the longest time about what may have happened in that era, right?
Isn't it easy just to apologize?
And I'm going to add on and say that over the years, the JVP, and not the NPP, because the JVP is part of the NPP, and I want to be able to make that distinction. The JVP has, in fact, talked about their concerns about that era and made it public also. Andra has spoken about in Parliament. I think there was an interview in which he also shared this, but it doesn't seem to be sticking in people's minds because it's a narrative that keeps coming up every time, just prior to an election, because it's a, for a lack of a better word, a sexy thing to pull out, to shoot at us. But I don't think that really is going to hold any basis anymore, because people now are not interested. If you really look at it also, and I'm going to be honest, if you look at the violent history of the other parties, and I don't want to do this whataboutism, but we are never holding any of the other parties accountable in the same way that we are asked, in the same way in which we ask the JVP to be accountable. So there is a sense of hypocrisy there, but that is not to say that the JVP hasn't already done so.
I'll leave the follow-up question to that to come from Shamir Rasuddin on Face the Nation whenever you're on there next. But here's a question from a potential voter for you. Please ask your guest how she proposes to 1. Address the incessant corruption amongst the MMCs. 2. reduce the amount spent on garbage collection. It's almost 30% of revenue.
Yeah. So if you look at the Colombo Municipal Council, the estimated revenue for this year is 17,854,000. So that's literally almost 18 billion rupees. We should be able to, if we had a good system in place, if we had an efficient system in place, a system that didn't have corruption, we would be in a much better place, and we would be able to really help our constituents in the way in which they need to be. So in answer to that first question, if we have more of our party in those places of power, I think that automatically initially addresses some of those concerns, because we believe that we are bringing people who are trustworthy. But there will always be, if you look at how people make money in the council, and this is why being in the council is such an interesting way to make money, the tenders, right, so corrupt. So many politicians kind of give out that.
So what are you going to do about this?
There have to be stricter laws, better control in place to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Can we go on to the next one? There were so-called big wigs in your party who are not in parliament. They're supposed to be contesting the local government elections. But don't you think, and is it fair to say that come the parliamentary elections, they will abandon their local government positions and then sort of go to the parliament and leave the local people home and sort of looking up?
High and dry. No, we don't believe that will happen, but we will also say this, right? And this is very important. If our teams are very capable teams, each of us are here because we all have the ability to, to be a part of changing this narrative. And we believe that each of us, all of us, including our teams, like we don't use, I mean, the reason that we use even the term team leader is because we understand that there is a team in place, right? And so whatever decisions have to be made at that point in time, we will, but we will not leave anyone high and dry. We will have systems and disciplines in place to make sure that if in case someone is called to run for a larger election, a bigger election later on, that nobody is going to be, no council is going to be disarrayed because of the departure of one or two people.
All right. If elected mayor, what and how will you deal with the hundreds of beggars and the homeless around Colombo to house them, etc., as this does not bode well for the city's image and for the safety of all concerned, including motorists? With the present situation, the issue will just get worse.
It will get worse, but I will go back to saying that I think we need to understand Colombo as not just pretty buildings and good roads, but also a place for people where there are networks of security, where there are networks of safety for them.
But what about these hundreds of beggars?
So there are people who are on the streets who, some, yes, it is a business for some, certainly,
yes,
but there are also those who are
genuine beggars.
Yeah, either which way, genuine or ingenuine, there have to be systems in place that support people, and that requires for a council to have safe homes. I can tell you during COVID, for instance, at a time in which I was not technically working with the party, but certainly working in a very different capacity, looking for homes and shelters for people who were on the streets. There were no homes. There was no place I could send people to. There were no places that we could, and so these are the real problems also.
If you reduce the cost of garbage collection from the 30% of revenue, say, to about 10% of revenue, you'd have a pile of cash.
If we reduce, I mean, with the money that the council makes for us every year, we can, and we believe if we become far more efficient and reduce our costs, right? There's 100 different ways in which we can do that. I mean, just to give you an example, just a couple of months ago, there was, the JVP, because it is a JVP in the CMC at the moment. 2018 was a JVP, it was a JVP that ran, not the NPP. And so our six Mantri Varu, who I keep using the word ministers, but the six of them are, our municipal council members were a part of, I mean, they brought up this conversation where the council was spending over $1 million every month on food.
Right.
For the
suburbs. So you're going to address all that.
Right. So these are things that we have to address because we believe that it is the money of the people. This is tax-paying Colombo. Tax-paying Colombo deserves to have that justice for the amounts that they're paying.
And tax-paying Colombo deserves to have Vraie Balthazaar.
Well, we hope so, and that's up for the tax-paying Colombo to decide.
Thank you very much. Vraie Balthazaar, thank you very much. Here's a little thank you card.
Thank you.
And that's the way it was on Newsline Live with Vraie Balthazaar. It's now time for the primetime news. Take care. Have a great evening. Hopefully a good weekend. And as always, God bless you all.